You're joining us on NewsX. On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched the largest ever terror attack on Israeli soil. The Palestinian organization, considered a terror group by the EU and the US, had stormed through the security fence separating Gaza and Israel in the early morning, killing 1,189 people, including 815 civilians, wounding 7,500 and taking 2,151 hostage. In response to the attacks, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared war on Hamas, vowing to inflict an unprecedented price. As Israel launched airstrikes in Gaza, thousands of people gathered for the first emotional commemorations marking the anniversary of Palestinian militant group Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack on Israel. The first candlelight vigils, memorials and marches to mark the anniversary were held in cities ranging from Tel Aviv to London, Paris and Berlin. Since then, Israel, which had been concentrating on its war against Hamas in Gaza, has escalated recently its attacks on Hezbollah, a powerful militant group in southern Lebanon. Joining us at this point live is Tal Hartuv, tour guide and survivor of the Hamas machete attack and a survivor of the October 7th attacks which took place last year. Tal Hartuv, thank you for being with us today on this extremely somber occasion, this grim day, this very sad anniversary that is of course being commemorated today. What are your thoughts as you look back on that day in 2023?
Before what happened on October the 7th, also by Hamas. What are my thoughts for today? Well, considering that I've been there, done that, so to speak, I do have a certain amount of ability to identify with some of the people who survived these atrocities. Israel itself has been, it's been a very subdued day. I still think, there was a Holocaust survivor who wrote that when he was trying to describe his experience in the Holocaust, he said, there's not a language for this. And as I've been watching social media and I've been watching Israeli TV, how they commemorate the start of this war, and by the way, we're still in it, we're not even post-trauma, we're traumatized still. I realize that people are fumbling around for words because language hasn't created the necessarily vocabulary that we need for these kind of events, that they defy human comprehension. So I think that also contributes a lot to a lot of the people that I meet or speak with. There's very little to say. We're still in that stage, and I don't think we'll ever quite truly believe it. We'll function, because that's been my experience. I cognitively understand what happened to me, but there's always been a little bit of, even though these years later, like, did that really, really happen? And I think what's true on the personal level is also true on the collective level. And in that sense, that's a blessing, because it means that you just have to buckle down and get on. And that's also one of the positive things I've seen throughout this day. I've heard so many stories of heroism. I've heard stories of people who had their loved ones murdered, and they're talking about rebuilding families. So despite the difficulties, the people of Israel, the Jewish people, have always had that awareness of history and continuity, and I think that's very beneficial to getting through something so horrific as the events of October the 7th a year ago.
Right. Also, Tal Hartuv, as we talk, of course, about, what took place on that particular day, we have to look at the year that has gone by. The war is not ended, and the conflict only seems to be escalating with each passing day.
Well, maybe if you're not actually living in Israel, it's escalating. But as I see it as a civilian, okay, I'll speak on behalf of 9 million civilians. On that morning a year ago, the Hamas, they launched over 3,000 rockets in one day. Now, a year later, we had 6 rockets. So it's hard to see that as an escalation. And I know that in this post-World War II world, people don't like war. I don't think anybody likes war. But sometimes war is a necessity to bring peace. And that's what I see here with Israel's military achievements. that we are de-escalating the conflict, even though there's a war going on. I mean, I've heard people say, oh, this is a terrible war. Of course it's a terrible war. I mean, was World War II like not so terrible war? All wars are horrible. There's nothing glamorous about wars, but there's a necessity to war to eradicate evil, eradicate other people who wish you dead, so that good and honorable people of all creeds and color can live in peace and get on with their lives. So I don't see it as a de-escalation at all. I see it as recently, the last few weeks, astonishing military victories in Lebanon, mostly led by an incredible intelligence espionage operation, which has brought really to a weakening of the Hezbollah, if not to at the moment, their ultimate demise.
Just tell us a bit about, what really your day that day was like, 1 year back. Where were you? What were you doing? What was originally your plan for that day? And what really happened then?
Okay, well, I was living at the time in Jerusalem, and as a Jewish survivor of terrorism, I actually have a lot of Arab friends, of course, I mean, citizens of Israel. And one young man who's in the army, an Arab Muslim, we're in very good contact, and he sent me at 6:30 in the morning, something like that. He sent me like a little video from one of the Arab Telegram channels. Now, because we always kind of goof around, we're laughing, I thought it was a joke. I see these people, these terrorists in a white tender van with machine guns, and I thought, what is this kid, what does he want? He's 25 years old, what does he want? Is he messing around? And then he calls me and he says, we're being attacked. And then at that moment, the sirens went off. I mean, usually sirens are around Gaza, and sometimes we get them in central Israel, but to have a siren in Jerusalem is very, very rare. So sirens went off, and I quickly, open the news, I check social media, and I see these alerts all over the place, the sirens all over Israel, and then it's like the expression, the penny dropped. We're at war. We're at war. So I ran downstairs because I have a safe room downstairs. Now, the thing is, we've been lured into a full sense of security, so it was a little bit of a mess in there. So I'm getting things out as quickly as I can. I get in the safe room, and then a few seconds afterwards, there's two enormous explosions. Now, I didn't know at that time because I'm locked in the safe room, but those rockets fell like a couple of 100 meters away. And that's when you just wake up that there's something extremely wrong here. So for the rest of the day, on one hand, I was personally glued to the news. I had the radio on, I had the television on, or the computer on. And on the other hand, you check in with your friends. Are you okay? Where are you? What's going on? Are you safe? And then you're trying to listen to instructions from the home command. What is the civilian job? What are you supposed to be doing? How to act responsibly? So this is going on. And then, of course, the whole October the 7th, you're talking about 36 hours where there's one act of barbarity, and then it unfolds. And an hour later, suddenly, because the news really now, most news channels, it's just a commentary on what people already know due to social media. So the Israeli news was very careful to blur out images of people being kidnapped. And then as the day went on and they got permission from the family, we started seeing these blurred images become crystal clear. And it's this state of bewilderment intercepted very frequently by rocket attacks and people running for shelter all over the country. And I'll tell you another thing that happened was, it's always funny that these pro-Hamas shrills, they know immediately how many Palestinians have been killed. Immediately the figures come out, right? I mean, it's taken us a year to identify DNA and where everybody is, and we're still doing it. And so what happened on October the 7th, you have like a moving band across the television screen at the bottom, and it would say for the first couple of hours, 22 dead, 100 injured. And for us as Israelis, that's also a very large number of people. But who would have thought that 36 hours, 48 hours later, those figures would have shot up to over 1,000 murdered and thousands more injured. And it dripped through, and as it dripped through, it became more and more, we're confounded with bewilderment. And I think we've stayed, in a sense, mentally, we're still there. We're still confounded by the lack of humanity that these people did, how they treated children and babies and women and men. There's nothing wrong with being men and soldiers. So we're still, I think, just trying to process, because you always want to put yourself in a situation, right? Like, oh, I wonder if I could do that to somebody else. And I don't think reasonable human beings could ever see themselves doing something like that. And of course, we have all the evidence, because these terrorists filmed their wicked deeds with their GoPros. And I'll tell you something else which has been astonishing following that day. Even though that the terrorists themselves confessed, and they proudly broadcasted all over social media, they stole phones from their victims, they broadcast the murder of their own victims using their own phone, live murders on Facebook. And one of the most astonishing things is, even if Israel had kept quiet, like the denial by the likes of UN Women and the United Nations and all these international organizations has absolutely been horrifying. And I think that's also added another shockwave.
Okay, Tal Hartuv, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on this occasion, of course, for Israel. Thank you very much for being with us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.